On Thanksgiving Day in 2018, Kelsey Berreth was seen on surveillance video buying ingredients for her holiday meal, but then she vanished. Her fiancé claimed that she just needed to take space away from her life and their baby, but her cars were still home, her purse was inside, and her phone pinged hundreds of miles away from home. As the days turned into weeks, the story completely unraveled. A secret girlfriend was discovered in another state. Disturbing lies were being spun about Kelsey being an unfit mother, and a growing mountain of evidence pointed to a meticulously planned murder without a body. Today, we're going to walk through the tragedy that happened on Thanksgiving Day, the cover up, and the courtroom battle that had to prove that a murder had occurred without ever finding a body. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell before you go. All right, my friends, let's get into today's case. Kelsey Berreth was a beloved daughter, a devoted mother, and a dedicated career woman. Born on September 15th, 1989, Kelsey grew up on her family's farm in Moses Lake, Washington, and despite her petite and put-together appearance, she had a really rugged side to her from the farm life that she grew up with. Friends said that she was a total tomboy and knew how to do everything on the farm, including driving tractors and throwing around huge bales of hay. Family and friends described Kelsey as a warm, kind person who lit up a room and just had this natural brightness to her. Kelsey trained as a pilot and flight instructor after high school, and by her late 20s, she secured a job as a flight instructor with DOS Aviation in Colorado. This was a career that she found really exciting and fulfilling. In 2016, Kelsey moved to Woodland Park, Colorado. Her coworkers described her as responsible and professional, saying that she never would have missed work without notice. In October 2017, she gave birth to her daughter, Kaylee, and she was truly the light of her life. Everyone around Kelsey said that she doted on her baby girl and never would have just left her behind. At 29, Kelsey appeared to have a really bright future ahead of her. She and Patrick were engaged, but they hadn't set their wedding date yet, and they maintained a somewhat unconventional arrangement between the two of them. Kelsey lived at her own place in town, and Patrick lived on his cattle ranch in nearby Florissant. Despite living separately, though, the couple shared custody of their daughter Kaylee, and they were raising her together as a family. Patrick Frazee was Kelsey's 32-year-old fiancé. Now, to the outside world, he was a hardworking Colorado cowboy and farrier, which I had to look it up. That's a horseshoer, and he ran that cattle ranch and cared for the horses. He grew up in Teller, Colorado, and lived on his family's ranch in Florissant, which is about 20 minutes away from where Kelsey was living. Patrick was known around town as a quiet rancher who just kept to himself. He and Kelsey met in 2015 and began a long-distance relationship with Patrick in Colorado and Kelsey in Washington. Kelsey relocated to Colorado to be closer to him, and in 2017, that's when they welcomed baby Kaylee and got engaged, but like I said before, they continued living apart. Behind this facade of this perfect little family, though, was manipulation and deceit that would later come to light. In 2016, Patrick actually rekindled a relationship with an old flame, and her name was Krystal Kenney. Krystal was a 32-year-old mother of two, and she was working as a registered nurse in Twin Falls, Idaho. She had known Patrick for over a decade, and they first met in 2006, way before Kelsey came into the picture. They dated off and on, and even after Krystal got married to someone else and started her own family, she continued to speak to Patrick. In fact, Krystal admitted that she was madly in love with Patrick and that this clouded her judgment. She had an affair with Patrick in 2015 and became pregnant with his child in 2016, and she chose to terminate that pregnancy. She then lied and told Patrick that she had miscarried and divorced her husband, and this just goes to show you how deeply entangled she was with Patrick and how much influence he had in her decision-making. This secret affair continued as he was building a new life with Kelsey, though. According to Krystal, Patrick harbored deep resentment and anger towards Kelsey in 2018, painting her as a bad partner and unfit mother. He would later claim that his relationship with Kelsey had completely fallen apart and said that she wanted to break up, but this was contradicted by Kelsey's own words and actions leading up to Thanksgiving. He also began telling horrible lies about Kelsey, including falsely accusing her of harming their daughter and having substance abuse problems, none of which had any evidence to support these claims. These lies were all a part of Patrick's attempt to vilify Kelsey. But people that knew Patrick described him as controlling and someone who always had a way of manipulating situations and people close to him, so he wasn't fooling anybody. By September 2018, Patrick confided in Krystal about his bitter feelings toward Kelsey, and he said that he wanted to get rid of her. He deceitfully told his girlfriend that Kelsey was dangerous, and by tapping into Krystal's lingering love and concern as another mom, he asked her to help him eliminate Kelsey. Over the fall of 2018, he solicited Krystal at least 3 separate times to murder Kelsey, each time with a different plan. First, Patrick suggested to poison Kelsey's favorite Starbucks drink, which was a caramel macchiato, by spiking it with drugs that she had access to as a nurse. Krystal went so far as to approach Kelsey in person with a coffee one day, disguised as a neighbor, but she got nervous and backed out. On another occasion, he gave her a metal pipe and instructed her to attack Kelsey with it. Once again, Krystal drove all the way to Colorado and even stalked around Kelsey's home with that metal pipe, but she didn't follow through with the attack. A third time, Patrick told her to use an aluminum baseball bat to kill Kelsey, but Krystal was caught off guard because there was a police car in the area, so once again, she backed out. Each time, she failed to alert the authorities or warn Kelsey, and this is something that she said that she deeply regretted. Despite backing out of all those attempts, Krystal stayed with him and never reported any of this to the police. Patrick's hold on her was very strong. He chastised her each time she refused, insisting that this was about his baby girl, and said that Krystal was failing little Kaylee by not killing her mom, Kelsey. Now, if that's not manipulation, I don't know what is. On Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd, 2018, it was supposed to be a normal holiday for Kelsey. Early that morning at around 9 a.m., Kelsey spoke on the phone with her mother, Cheryl, about a recipe that she wanted to make for Patrick. They talked about Kelsey's plans to make that sweet potato casserole for him for dinner and about everything she was looking forward to that day. Cheryl later said that her daughter sounded really happy on that phone call, and there were no hints of any conflicts or breakup going on. Right after speaking with her mom, Kelsey texted Patrick at 9:37 a.m. to ask him to pick up sweet potatoes for this casserole. Then they talked on the phone at 9:40 for a few minutes to discuss their plans for the day. By late morning, Kelsey headed out to run errands with baby Kaylee. At 12:27 p.m., surveillance footage at Safeway, which is their local grocery store, captured Kelsey pushing her shopping cart with Kaylee in her car seat. She bought groceries, including ingredients, or at least some of the ingredients for the casserole, and this was confirmed by the store receipts. Now, this Safeway video is the last known public sighting of Kelsey alive. In the footage, she appears normal and calm, playing and talking with her 1-year-old as they were leaving the store. Now, this timing is key. Kelsey finished shopping at 12:30, and her townhome was only a few minutes away. Shortly after this, Patrick was also seen around town, but only with the baby. Between 12:54 and 1:17, he was caught on Walmart security cameras in Woodland Park, carrying an infant in a car seat with a baby inside. Witnesses later identified the baby as Kaylee, wrapped in the same blanket that she was seen on security footage at Safeway earlier with her mom. This means that after leaving Safeway, Kelsey had handed off the baby to Patrick. He would later tell police that he met Kelsey around 1 p.m. in the alleyway behind her townhome just to exchange their daughter for the day. At 1:24 p.m., a neighbor's security camera recorded someone matching Patrick's appearance entering Kelsey's front door. The image even showed Kelsey with him at the doorway just moments earlier, and Kelsey was holding a plant that she had just bought at the store for the holiday. This evidence directly contradicted the story that he told the police. Based on Krystal's testimony and some of the forensic evidence, sometime that afternoon, Patrick Frazee murdered Kelsey Berreth in the living room of her own home. This killing was as cold-blooded as it was calculated. He allegedly coaxed Kelsey into playing a game with him, where she smelled candles while blindfolded to guess the scents. Sadly, Kelsey went along with this game. As she was inhaling the scent of the candle with her eyes covered, Patrick crept up behind her with a baseball bat. In an instant, he began bludgeoning Kelsey with the bat, delivering blow after blow. This assault was just as vicious as it was relentless, and according to what Patrick later told Krystal, Kelsey's last words during this beating were, "Please stop." But he didn't stop, not until Kelsey laid there lifeless on the ground. A blood spatter analyst later stated that Kelsey was likely struck 10 to 15 times with the bat. The ferocity of the attack caused extensive bleeding and horrifying injuries. Patrick hit Kelsey with so much force that he knocked several of her teeth out. One tooth or fragment of it flew off and got lost in the bloody scene, and this was something that caused Patrick to panic. He would later mention to Krystal that he was worried that the tooth might have been left behind as evidence because of this. As her mother was being brutally murdered, baby Kaylee sat alone in a room, and this image really breaks my heart. Now, with Kelsey dead or dying on the floor, he then focused on covering up what he had done, and he came prepared for this. Patrick grabbed a large black storage tote and some other materials to dispose of Kelsey's remains. He quickly placed Kelsey's body inside of the tote and sealed it shut. At around 3:36 p.m., so roughly 2 hours after he first entered Kelsey's home, Patrick was seen once again on the neighbor's surveillance camera, but coming out of the front door this time. Now he was alone and carrying something, and it wasn't his daughter's car seat. At that same time, phone records show that Patrick called both his mother, Sheila, and his secret girlfriend, Krystal Kenney. What was said in the call to his mother, unfortunately, remains unknown, but the call to Krystal was shocking. According to Krystal, Patrick told her that she had a mess to come clean up in Colorado, and she said that she immediately knew that that meant that Kelsey had been killed. Patrick was calling Krystal, who was 800 miles away in Idaho, to come help him cover up the homicide. Patrick then planned to make it seem like Kelsey was still alive, just to keep the suspicion away from himself. This reminded me so much of Jasmine Pace's case, which also took place around Thanksgiving, so let me know if you notice some of these similarities too, because I find that so disturbing. Patrick had taken Kelsey's cell phone after murdering her. Starting that evening on the 22nd and over the next few days, he would use both his phone and Kelsey's phone to send texts to create this false narrative that Kelsey had left voluntarily. That evening, signals from cell towers showed both of their phones moving together, though, through the area of Cripple Creek, which is just west of Woodland Park. The devices were traveling simultaneously, which is just evidence that he had possession of Kelsey's phone as he was driving away with it. Investigators stated that their phones remained together for the entirety of the time that they were texting back and forth. Meanwhile, Patrick was trying to hide Kelsey's body. Instead of disposing of it at his own property, he took the tote with Kelsey's remains to a place called Nash Ranch, which is a nearby farm that he had access to. There, he hid the tote beneath a haystack until he could figure out his next moves. Cell tower data traced both phones moving around Patrick's home in Florissant and once again out toward the Cripple Creek area on the 23rd, probably to check on Kelsey's remains and make sure that she was still there. Later that day, back in Idaho, Krystal Kenney was making plans of her own. Even though she had received Patrick's call on Thanksgiving instructing her to come clean up this mess, she didn't immediately drive out on the 22nd. On November 23rd, Krystal arranged a plan to cover up her absence back home. She asked a close friend and coworker if they could swap vehicles just for a couple of days because she said that she had a friend that needed her help moving out of state, but in all actuality, she wanted the vehicle so that no one would recognize her in Colorado. The friend agreed, and she told her ex-husband, who she was still living with, by the way, a fabricated story that she was going to a friend's birthday party that weekend. Now, with all of her lies orchestrated, Krystal was on her way in her coworker's car to go see Patrick. Krystal Kenney left Idaho on the 24th to start her 12-hour drive back to Colorado. She brought a kit of cleaning supplies, including tools like bleach, rubber gloves, a hazmat suit, booties for her shoes, a hairnet, and trash bags. She fully understood that she was walking into a murder scene. Phone records show Patrick and Krystal were in contact several times on the 24th as she was driving, and they spoke at 7:23, 10:47, 11:39, 1:06, and 5:21 that day. She tried to downplay these calls by initially claiming that she was at Patrick's ranch inquiring about a horse from 9 to 5 p.m., but investigators saw right through her story. If they were supposedly together all day, why would they be calling each other by phone multiple times? And why does her cell tower information perfectly contradict that story? Krystal drove directly to Kelsey Berreth's townhouse, and what she encountered inside was utterly horrific. Blood was everywhere. It was on the walls, pooled on the hardwood floor, and it had stained the furniture. She saw bloody spray up the wall taller than where she was standing, on the fireplace, on the sofa, the TV, the baby's stuffed animals, a cedar chest, and the appliances in the kitchen. Nearly every surface in the living area was marked with Kelsey's blood. It was way worse than Krystal could have imagined, and she stood there in shock. But Krystal did what she promised, and she cleaned. For the next several hours on the 24th, she scrubbed to erase all of the evidence of Kelsey's violent death. Wearing the protective suit, gloves, and booties, she cleaned and mopped every visible blood stain. She used bleach and other cleaners to sanitize the floors and walls, washed the blood-soaked items, and gathered numerous bloodied objects to later dispose of. Some of the items that Krystal said that she took were curtains, pillowcases, an oven mitt, and even Kelsey's purse, all of which had her blood on them. Krystal was very thorough, but thankfully, she wasn't perfect. According to her, she deliberately left a few traces of blood behind. She testified that she left some blood spatter that were on the fireplace and on the baby gate, saying that these overlooked spots could potentially help the investigators later just to prove that a crime had occurred there. This was significant because those traces were eventually found by forensic teams, but let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below because this very much so comes off as self-preservation to me, not trying to help the investigators, but it sounds like that's how she was trying to paint it. While Krystal cleaned Kelsey's home, Patrick was busy with the other part of the cover-up, handling Kelsey's remains and other evidence. Sometime that afternoon, after Krystal finished cleaning, they met up and drove to Nash Ranch where Kelsey's body was hidden. Cell tower records confirmed that between 5 to 6:15 p.m. on the 24th, signals from Patrick's phone, Krystal's phone, and Kelsey's phone all pinged together near that same location by Cripple Creek. Then they hauled the heavy tote from the haystack and loaded it into Patrick's truck. They returned to Patrick's ranch in Florissant with Kelsey's body to destroy the remains and evidence. On the evening of the 24th, Patrick prepared a makeshift fire. He took a large metal 100-gallon livestock water trough and placed the plastic tote containing Kelsey inside of it. They also threw in the various bloodstained items from Kelsey's condo, including cleaning rags, the baseball bat or murder weapon, and even some of Kelsey's personal belongings that Patrick wanted gone. He poured gasoline and motor oil all over the pile of evidence, and then he lit it on fire. The blaze was intense, and it burned for a very long time. Krystal recalled seeing the plastic tote melt away in the flames, and at one point, she thought she saw what might have been a human body burning as the tote was disintegrating. She didn't look very closely because she said that she couldn't bear to actually see Kelsey's body burning. But somehow she could help clean up everything. For hours, they kept the fire roaring to ensure that everything was burnt to ash and unrecognizable. An expert later testified that when remains are lit on fire, they oftentimes liquefy, making it very challenging to recover. Patrick's use of motor oil likely created a very hot, oily burn, and investigators would find an oily-looking stain later on in the dirt at the burn site. One item that wasn't burned that night on the ranch was Kelsey's cell phone because Patrick had different plans for that. He gave Kelsey's phone to Krystal Kenney, instructing her to take it back with her to Idaho to continue making it seem like Kelsey had just traveled somewhere else far away. He also gave her Kelsey's handgun, telling her to get rid of that too. Patrick's twisted idea behind the gun was to later suggest that Kelsey might have taken the gun and taken her own life, which could explain her sudden disappearance. The amount of premeditation that he put into murdering his fiancé and mother of his daughter is mind-boggling to me in this case. So, Krystal took the gun and the phone, agreeing to handle both of them. That night, with the fire dying down, they sifted through the ashes to ensure that no obvious bone fragments or identifiable pieces remained. Patrick said to Krystal, "No body, no crime," because he truly believed that without a corpse, he couldn't be convicted. He was truly banking on the fire to obliterate any proof of a murder. On Sunday, November 25th, Krystal Kenney left for Idaho to carry out the final phase of their plan. Cell towers along the route from Colorado to Idaho picked up signals from both phones traveling together. That morning and afternoon, Patrick continued sending and receiving texts with Kelsey's phone, and a text from Kelsey's phone was also sent to her employer during that drive. She said that she wouldn't be coming to work the following week. Another message went to Kelsey's mom's phone, which was so cruel of them to make Cheryl believe that her daughter was still alive and thinking of her. Krystal admitted that she sent texts to both Patrick and Kelsey's mom from Kelsey's phone during her drive back to the investigators. By 4 p.m. on November 25th, Krystal Kenney reached Jerome, Idaho, where she had arranged to swap vehicles back with her friend as planned. After switching cars, she drove to a spot near Mallard Gorge State Park in Idaho. Around 5:13 p.m., Kelsey Berreth's phone pinged for the very last time off of a cell tower near Gooding, Idaho, in the vicinity of that state park. Investigators found out that Krystal destroyed Kelsey's phone at that location, either by smashing and dumping it or possibly throwing it into the gorge. When Idaho police later searched Krystal's property, they found burned chunks of a cell phone in her backyard burning pit, suggesting that she also could have burned some of the pieces of Kelsey's phone after getting back to her home. The phone was never recovered intact. With the phone gone, Krystal Kenney tried to resume her normal life in Idaho, hoping to just remain under the radar. She had done what Patrick asked, but Kelsey's loved ones and soon law enforcement would not let her vanish without a fight. For Kelsey Berreth's family, the first sign of trouble came when they couldn't reach her over the Thanksgiving weekend. It was really unusual for Kelsey to stay so silent for so long. She was very close with her mother, Cheryl, and frequently communicated with her about the baby and just daily life. As days passed on with no word from Kelsey, and after that brief text that was sent from Kelsey's phone on the 25th, her mom worried. On December 2nd, so 10 days after the last time Kelsey was seen, Cheryl could no longer contain her worry. She drove from her house in Idaho, where Kelsey had grown up, to Colorado to go check on her daughter. Finding that Kelsey wasn't there, Cheryl went to the Woodland Park Police Department and officially reported her daughter as missing. She explained that she hadn't heard from Kelsey since before Thanksgiving, and this was completely out of character for her daughter. Kelsey had never just disappeared like this without telling anyone. Police officers responded immediately by performing a welfare check at Kelsey's townhouse. They found out, of course, that no one was home. There were no obvious signs of any kind of forced entry or struggle visible. However, there were some things that were off. Kelsey's 2 cars were parked outside and locked, meaning she hadn't gone anywhere far by herself. Also, inside of her house, once the police got inside, they found cinnamon rolls on the counter, and Kelsey's purse, keys, and jacket were all still inside of the house. It looked as if she'd planned to return soon, not like someone who just ran away and packed up. These clues heightened the police's suspicion that Kelsey might not have left voluntarily or safely. Investigators found unmistakable signs of violence inside of Kelsey Berreth's townhome, despite the clear attempts to clean the scene. Forensic teams discovered small but significant traces of Kelsey's blood all throughout the living area, including, as we know, on the fireplace, baseboards, floorboards, a baby gate, and even on the bathroom toilet. Blood was everywhere, even unseen to the eye. When sections of the living room floor were removed, they found a massive amount of blood pooling beneath the wood planks, and this was evidence that a large volume of blood had seeped through the flooring before anyone had an opportunity to clean it up. The remaining blood patterns and wipe marks indicated that the scene had been scrubbed with bleach, but not thoroughly enough to erase everything. DNA testing later confirmed the blood belonged to Kelsey. At this point, Kelsey's case was a missing person investigation. Woodland Park Police contacted friends, checked hospitals, and of course reached out to the one person that would have seen her last, Patrick Frazee. He initially played the part of this concerned ex-fiancé. When officers spoke to him on December 2nd, he claimed that he had no idea where Kelsey was and said that Kelsey had broken up with him on Thanksgiving Day and wanted space. He said that they met around noon or 1 on the 22nd to exchange their daughter, and at that time, Kelsey supposedly handed back his ring and called off their engagement, and he told police that Kelsey said she was just going to go stay with her friend for a while. He also mentioned returning some of her belongings during that alleged breakup, including her gun and house keys, implying that she might have needed them if she left. Patrick added that after Thanksgiving, he continued to text with Kelsey over the next few days, which made it seem like she was still alive, just not with him. He even showed those texts to the police officers. Patrick's story could possibly sound plausible because couples do break up, and one may go off the grid for a bit. But to Kelsey Berreth and to detectives, something wasn't sitting right. Cheryl flat out told the police that the breakup story didn't make any sense. Kelsey never mentioned any breakup during their call on Thanksgiving morning. Also, Kelsey's actions like shopping for dinner ingredients and arranging childcare were inconsistent with someone who was about to leave her fiancé and her child. Investigators felt that if Kelsey had truly parted ways with him on the 22nd, why did she buy ingredients for a Thanksgiving dish for him, and why would she text him about it? All signs pointed to Kelsey expecting to see Patrick with the casserole, not breaking up. Meanwhile, police kept a close eye on Patrick's behavior. On December 3rd or 4th, he voluntarily handed over his cell phone to law enforcement because he believed that the texts in his phone would back up his story. He also may have thought that surrendering his phone maybe made him look innocent by cooperating with them. But around this time, Patrick also began making some legal moves that seemed a little fast. On December 12th, he signed a notarized document naming individuals who could care for baby Kaylee if he weren't able to, and he left Kelsey, the mother of his daughter, off of that list. Investigators later pointed this out as very interesting because he knew that she was gone. Patrick knew Kelsey wasn't coming back, but her body hadn't been found just yet, so this was very suspicious. As the days passed, Woodland Park Police started to realize that Kelsey's case was likely not a simple missing persons one anymore. On December 4th, Krystal Kenney suddenly got a new phone and phone number. She told her ex-husband that she had lost her old phone and she needed to replace it. Investigators would later point out that Krystal's rushed phone change happened right when Patrick handed his phone over to the police in Colorado, hinting that she might be trying to distance herself from the situation or possibly destroy evidence. On December 10th, Woodland Park Police Chief Miles DeYoung held the first press conference to announce that Kelsey Berreth was missing and asked the public for help. The chief described Kelsey's disappearance as completely out of character and confirmed that she hadn't been seen since Thanksgiving. The police were very careful with their words, but by then they had already suspected foul play by saying they haven't ruled anyone out in response to questions about Patrick. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered two pivotal leads that began to crack Patrick's carefully constructed story wide open. One of the first breakthroughs came from analyzing cell phone data. With his phone in their possession and a warrant obtained for Kelsey's phone records, investigators mapped out exactly where the phones had been and when. What they found was shocking. Kelsey's phone activity didn't align at all with her known habits or whereabouts. The last signals from Kelsey's phone were not in Woodland Park at all, but instead in southern Idaho on November 25th. Specifically, Kelsey's phone pinged near Gooding, Idaho, hundreds of miles from her Colorado home, and then nothing. This was baffling. If Kelsey had supposedly left on her own to somewhere, why Idaho? She had no ties there, but an answer to that question was in Patrick Frazee's contact list. Phone records also revealed that Patrick had been in frequent communication with a phone number in Idaho, particularly on November 22nd around the time of the murder and afterwards. Investigators traced that phone number and soon identified that it belonged to Krystal Kenney, a 32-year-old resident of Twin Falls, Idaho. This was a new name to them. Kelsey's friends and family had never mentioned to Krystal, but Patrick's phone logs showed multiple calls to her number on Thanksgiving afternoon and all the days following. Putting two and two together, investigators theorized that Krystal might have had Kelsey's phone, which would explain the Idaho ping, and now they just need to figure out why. On December 14th, after obtaining a search warrant, law enforcement conducted an extensive search of Patrick's 35-acre ranch. The search included his house, barn, and fields, and they had evidence technicians, cadaver dogs, and even heavy machinery to churn the soil and snow. Although on that first day's search they didn't find Kelsey or her remains, investigators did find some suspicious items like a bottle of bleach and a mop that showed blood traces on it. These items were discovered inside Patrick's home and suggested an attempt at a cleanup, and this raised even more suspicion that a violent crime had occurred and someone was trying to erase it. That very same day, on December 14th, the FBI reached out to question Krystal Kenney in Idaho over the phone. Krystal didn't initially crack, and she lied repeatedly. She claimed that she hadn't talked to Patrick Frazee in over a month, and then later changed her story to say, oh, maybe it's within a month or two. Then she said that she'd been in Colorado around Thanksgiving, specifically on the 24th, but only to look at a horse that Patrick was selling. Then she returned to Idaho on the night of the 25th. Krystal stuck to this story, denying any involvement or knowledge of Kelsey's disappearance. After that call, though, she must have realized that the authorities were onto her because she had confessed to her ex-husband that the FBI contacted her and said that she was very nervous about it. To her ex, she repeated the same horse buying story and even suggested that someone might have set her up. These inconsistent and defensive statements only increased the investigators' suspicion that she had something to hide. By mid-December, the case had then shifted to a suspected homicide investigation. Woodland Park Police publicly stated that circumstances made them fear that Kelsey was no longer alive. They also mentioned, while standing in front of his ranch, that Patrick Frazee was no longer just the concerned fiancé, but that now he was a person of interest who hadn't been cleared yet. Tension was building. On December 15th, after 2 intense days, the search of Patrick's property concluded without finding Kelsey's body. Investigators had combed through haystacks, horse troughs, and acres of dirt, and they even sifted through a water feeder that looked like it could have some burn residue on the inside of it. Although they didn't locate remains, they had gathered enough circumstantial and physical evidence, like the blood traces, the bleach, and the phone records, to feel confident that a crime had in fact occurred and exactly who was behind it. What about Krystal Kenney, though? After her initial lies, Colorado law enforcement wasn't about to let her fade into the background. On December 17th, so just a few days after that phone interview, agents from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, and FBI traveled to Idaho to speak with her in person. Sitting in her living room in Twin Falls, they pressed her once again for the truth. Krystal, sensing that the walls were starting to kind of cave in, asked if she could please consult an attorney, and this was a clear sign to the investigators that she knew something. The agents left, but they didn't wait long. On December 20th, with legal counsel by her side, Krystal Lee Kenney decided to cooperate fully with the investigators. She realized that coming clean was her best chance at avoiding being charged with murder herself, so Krystal spilled everything. She confessed to her role in the attempted murder plots and shared how Patrick Frazee had killed Kelsey on Thanksgiving. She also admitted that she participated in cleaning up and disposing of evidence, and her confession matched the evidence the detectives had already been piecing together. She described in her own words the horrifying scene in Kelsey's home, including the blood on the walls and floor, the tooth she found, and the hours of scrubbing that she did in that hazmat suit. She explained the instructions that Patrick gave her, the calls that they exchanged, and their trip to retrieve and burn Kelsey's body. She even led investigators through a step-by-step timeline of where they were on specific dates, basically walking them through the entire crime and cover-up. There was no turning back now. Because of Krystal's confession, Woodland Park Police got an arrest warrant for Patrick Frazee, and by 7 a.m. on December 21st, he was arrested at his home. Patrick was initially held on suspicion of first-degree murder and solicitation of first-degree murder, and because of the gravity of those kinds of charges, he was held without bond. The arrest of Kelsey's fiancé made national headlines, and attention quickly turned to the role of this mysterious Idaho woman who helped crack the case. On December 22nd, police in Twin Falls confirmed that they were working together with the Colorado authorities and had done several search warrants in Idaho related to Kelsey's disappearance. They didn't name Krystal Lee Kenney publicly at that time, but they did acknowledge that the evidence had been collected in Idaho as well. With Patrick in custody, baby Kaylee was just 14 months old and had lost both of her parents. A custody hearing on December 27th resulted in a judge granting temporary custody of Kaylee to Kelsey's parents, Cheryl and Daryl Berreth. Patrick's mother, Sheila, attempted to intervene to try to get custody of her granddaughter, but the court sided with the Berreths for the child's stability and well-being. This gave a small sense of peace to Kelsey's grieving family because it meant that the last piece of Kelsey, their grandbaby, would be safe with them. On December 31st, 2018, the Teller County District Attorney charged Patrick Frazee with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. That dual murder count included one for premeditated murder and another for an alternative theory, which allowed the prosecutors to secure a conviction even without a body. Confusing. I know, I had to look all this up. The solicitation charges were for the multiple times Patrick tried to persuade Krystal to kill Kelsey, though. In early January 2019, the public learned the identity of the Idaho woman that was involved in the case when media outlets revealed that Krystal Lee Kenney was under investigation. Her name quickly spread, sparking a ton of speculation about her role in this. On January 4th, Kelsey's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Patrick, accusing him of inflicting emotional and physical abuse before killing their daughter. And this civil suit emphasized the family's desire to make sure he'd be held accountable regardless of what the trial outcome would be. Despite Krystal's cooperation, Kelsey's remains were never found. She shared that Patrick burned the body on the ranch and likely disposed of the ashes by spreading them or maybe even mixing them with manure, which would make recovery very difficult. Although the absence of a body posed a challenge, prosecutors emphasized that Patrick's plan of this no body, no crime would fail because of the circumstantial and forensic evidence it was continuing to mount, which only strengthened the case against him. After Patrick Frazee's arrest, investigators and prosecutors turned to Krystal Lee Kenney, whose confession and cooperation were essential to build this case. On February 8, 2019, she entered a plea of guilty, pleading 1 count of evidence tampering for moving Kelsey's body and phone. On February 8, 2019, she entered a plea deal, pleading guilty to 1 count of evidence tampering for moving Kelsey Berreth's phone. As a part of that plea, she admitted that she knew that Patrick had killed Kelsey on or about November 22nd, and the agreement limited her to a potential sentence of a maximum of 3 years in prison if and only if she fully cooperated and testified truthfully, and her sentencing was postponed until after Patrick's trial to make sure that she was honest. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, because I cannot believe that after all of her involvement, the max she could get was 3 years. Patrick was arraigned on May 24th, 2019, and he of course pleaded not guilty, which I was pretty surprised about, given the fact that there was so much evidence. The judge scheduled his trial for October 28th, and in July, the DA announced that they would not be seeking the death penalty, but instead a life without parole conviction for Krystal's cooperation. Patrick's defense floated and then abandoned the idea of blaming someone else. They also tried to suppress statements that he made to a child welfare employee, arguing that he was questioned without his Miranda rights. None of this went anywhere, though. The November 2019 murder trial took 3 weeks and it was highly publicized. They reconstructed the final hours, the brutal killing, and the elaborate cover up that followed. On November 1st, opening statements began, and prosecutors painted Patrick as cold and calculated, repeating his infamous phrase of this no body, no crime nonsense. The defense countered by painting Krystal as a liar seeking a lenient sentence, and they argued that the crime scene circumstances were unlikely because of the holiday. The prosecution laid out the case chronologically, though. Kelsey's mother and brother talked about her last messages and the discovery of blood in her condo. Surveillance footage, witnesses, and neighbors all helped to reconstruct what happened on Thanksgiving Day. Law enforcement talked about the welfare check, the locked condo and cars, wipe marks, and Patrick's suspicious earlier statements. Forensic testimony showed that despite cleaning, blood spatter, streaks, and soaked floorboards pointed to a violent assault, and cell tower data confirmed everything that Krystal stated as well. Krystal's testimony was emotional and the most critical part of the trial. She described the horrific crime scene and said that Patrick told her Kelsey's last words were, "Please stop." She also explained how he burned Kelsey's remains at his ranch. Although the defense attacked her plea deal and initial lies, her testimony matched all the footage, the phone data, and forensic evidence. Character witnesses testified that Kelsey was a devoted mother and that this all contradicted Patrick's attempts to smear her in court. The most incriminating moment came from a jail inmate who testified that Patrick tried to hire him to kill multiple witnesses, including Krystal and a family friend. Jurors were shown his handwritten hit list notes in the courtroom. Given that overwhelming evidence, the defense called a few witnesses but didn't put Patrick on the stand. Closing arguments were delivered on November 18th, and prosecutors tied every fact back to Krystal's testimony. The defense repeated that Krystal was unreliable and that missing body created doubt. The jury deliberated only a few hours before finding Patrick Frazee guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder and all 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder and tampering with a deceased human body. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 156 additional years due to the, quote, extraordinary depravity of the killing, cleanup, burning of remains, and murder plots, end quote. On January 28, 2020, Krystal was sentenced for her role, and although the prosecutors honored their agreement to seek that leniency, the judge criticized her actions as cold, calculating, and cruel. She received the maximum under her plea deal, so 3 years for evidence tampering. In February of 2021, though, the Colorado Court of Appeals ruled that her 3-year sentence exceeded the statutory limit. She was resentenced to 18 months with credit for time served, which is already more than a year. So on March 23, 2021, she was released on parole and went back to Idaho. She remains a convicted felon under supervision, and Patrick was transferred to the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility to serve his 156-year prison sentence. Kelsey's parents also won the wrongful death judgment against Patrick, which just further affirmed his responsibility for what he did. Baby Kaylee is being raised by Kelsey's parents in a stable, loving home, but Kelsey's death left a profound impact on the community, her daughter, and her family. Memorial vigils were held, and Thanksgiving has become an annual reminder of the absence that they will forever feel in their family. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'm sending you all my love, and I'm sending Kelsey and her daughter and family all my love as well. I know that I mentioned at the end of the last video that I contemplated taking this weekend off, mainly because of the online bullies, to be completely honest, but I shrugged it off and I'm here. Being sensitive and an empath, the online hate can be a lot sometimes, so I really do mean it when I say that the kindness that you all show me truly means the world to me. I hope that you enjoyed all the yummy food this week, and please take great care of yourselves this weekend. Nurse's orders. Oh, and don't forget to drop our secret handshake in the chat. See you next time. Bye.